my dear followers, friends, viewers, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. Do you want to know the real story that inspired The Exorcist, film released in 1973? Do you want to see the very rare videos and incredible images of the very first exorcism happened in 1949 that inspired The Exorcist, released in 1973 by William Friedkin? Okay, I'm ready, because in few minutes I'm going to show you the incredible, very rare, real, disturbing images and videos of the very first exorcism. Happened in 1949. I thank who really sent me these very rare, incredible, real videos and images. In few minutes at my personal computer. First of all, I want to remind you that 1 year and a half ago I did several documentaries about The Exorcist, film released in 1973. So if you want to know all the curiosities about that movie, the curse of the Exorcist, and also real incredible facts linked to the Exorcist movie, not only the curse, but there was a real serial killer who played in the movie The Exorcist, as there was a real priest then later received allegations to be a pedophile and much more. And I want to remind you that about 1 year ago I did a shock documentary about the last exorcism of Father Amorth and The Exorcist. The Exorcist! Why are they so strictly linked? If you want to watch these documentaries, you can find all them here on my YouTube channel completely for free, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. But now, let's talk about the very first exorcism, or it's better to say exorcisms that inspired The Exorcist. You must know that I want to remind you that if you want to watch my previous documentaries about The Exorcist and also my shocking documentary, The Last Exorcism of Father Amorth and The Exorcist, you must know that in that documentary it has been a descent into hell also to me. Because you must know that The Exorcist, Father Amorth, accepted the request of William William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist 1973, to shoot a documentary, a film documentary about the exorcism that Father Amorth was doing in Rome on a woman called Christina, possessed by many demons. It's incredible because this docu-film had to end up in a good way. Instead, it was really the last exorcism of Father Amorth that ended up in tragedy, because Father Amorth didn't reach the last phase, the last exorcism to liberate that woman, because he died on September the 16th, 2016. So William Friedkin was completely devastated because his docu-film didn't have to end up with the death of Father Amorth, but with the liberation of that woman by the demons and the victory of Father Amorth. Instead, if you watch that documentary, there were too many strong demons, and Father Amorth was 91. So he was preparing to do the last exorcism to liberate once and for all that woman, but he died before that. And he died from pulmonary complications, but he was really jaded by from that exorcisms killed him. And William Friedkin was shocked because a few months later also died one of his closest friends. I'm talking about William Peter Blatty, who was the first one who wrote the book The Exorcist, released in 1971. He did this book inspired by the real exorcism I'm going to talk you and make you watch. He sent his book to William Friedkin, who was at the beginning skeptical, but then he decided to shoot The Exorcist, and the screenwriter was William Peter Blatty. So he was the screenwriter. So they were so close that only a few months after the death of Father Amorth, while he was shooting this docu-film with the title The Devil and Father Amorth, also William Peter Blatty died on January the 12th, 2017 from a cancer. You must know that in Maryland, there was a guy whose identity remained unknown until his death happened in 2020. So after his death on the 10th of May 2020, Now we can know the exact identity of the guy who inspired William Peter Blatty to write The Exorcist, the book released in 1971 with several differences. So, we are in Maryland, 1949, and this guy, the first name, he was known as Roland Doe because his identity had to be unknown, absolutely unknown. So, what did happen? Roland Doe, and then I reveal you his real name, then they say that his name was Robbie Mannheim, and it wasn't his real name, also Robbie Mannheim. He was born on June the 1st, 1935. He was very fascinated by his aunt Harriet, who was a spiritualist, at the point to give him as gift a Ouija table. What happened? His aunt Harriet died, and Roland was crying, he was devastated, so he wanted to contact his dead aunt. So he took a Ouija table and he started to consult and play with it, but with serious intention to have a direct contact with his lovely dead aunt. And then it all became strange at the point that Roland was completely possessed by many demons. So his family was Lutheran, but when they went to the Lutheran priest or bishop, he suggested to call a Catholic priest because it was the Catholic Church that could authorize an exorcism. And I want to remind you that there is not an only exorcism. All the people who are really possessed by demons have to undergo many exorcisms. So the family was so desperate that, first of all, they consulted all the kinds of doctors, psychiatrists, but no answer. They met two Jesuits who offered to practice exorcisms on Roland Doe. And the exorcism started in the first months of 1949, and finally Roland Doe was liberated on April the 18th, 1949, and that day, at that time, was the day of Easter. And he was liberated while he was hospitalized in an hospital in St. Louis. So, you must know that then he was completely healed and he didn't want anybody know that he was the guy, especially when the book The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty was released in 1971 and then The Exorcist film 1973. I can tell you that then he had a very successful career because he became a scientist and he worked for NA as A. Incredible! He got married and he gave the name Michael to his first son because, according to him, in the last exorcism, Saint Michael the Archangel helped to liberate him completely. Then he died on May the 10th, 2020. And he was almost 86 years old, and his real name was Ronald Edwin Hunkeler. And so now we can have those documents, those really, I warn you, they are very rare, real, disturbing videos and images. Let's go to watch it. I start with making you watch the very rare, shocking photos of the exorcism of Ronald Hunkeler. Then we delve into the story and I will also show you the videos. I start warning, some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. Other shocking real photos. And now I delve into the story, how it all began. Warning, some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers.
William Peter Blatty read an article about a young man that was under demonic possession. The title of the article was Priest Frees Mount Rainier Boy Reported Held in Devil's Grip. He read the article in the Washington Post when he was a 20-year-old English literature major at Georgetown University. If it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't even know about the exorcism of Roland Doe. Roland Doe, and the name Robert Mannheim, is how the young man was referred to in order to protect his anonymity. We found out his real name after he passed away in 2020. His real name was Roland Hunkeler. The movie he inspired was unlike anything moviegoers had ever witnessed in 1973, and it's often referred to as one of the scariest movies ever made. Lines to see the movie were so long that some theaters even provided coffee. And
when it comes to scary movies,
The Exorcist is considered one of the scariest movies of all time. In fact, when it came out, people who went to go see it got so sick and was so bothered by it that people even threw up in the aisles. Some people even ran out of the theaters, and to this day, people won't watch it. People are terrified of this movie, probably because it's based off of actual events that took place in both Maryland and here in St. Louis. Right down this street, actually. Getting a little nervous about this one.
I went to check it out. The manager of the National Theater in Westwood says that there indeed are at least a dozen people who faint or become ill during every showing. But The Exorcist is still drawing sellout houses for every performance, complete with lines around the block. I spent an evening in the lobby just to see if people really do come stumbling out in the middle of the picture, as reported. They did, so I asked them why.
It just scared me to death. Things just like this really scared me to death. I'm just nervous.
the movie scared very much.
The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, is actually based off of a novel by William Peter Blatty, who got the inspiration for his book from a newspaper article about a 14-year-old boy who was supposedly demon-possessed.
Now, I found out for your biography that you had actually researched an exorcism that happened with a boy back in 1950-something, was it?
It was 1949.
Okay.
When I first heard of it.
And then how did that inspire you to write
imagine hearing about, for the first time in your life, having never heard of possession, hearing the details, so-called details, of an alleged case of demonic possession going on in your neighborhood while you're attending classes at Georgetown University. I mean, it was absolutely startling. And I thought at the time that if one could adduce enough evidence to demonstrate that this was most probably authentic, what a tremendous piece of evidence for our hopes for immortality of the soul, our hopes for everything that was being taught by the Jesuits at Georgetown being an absolute fact. So we all want to put our fingers into the wound in the hand of Christ.
The real road leading to the real house.
Roanoke Drive to the house here in St. Louis where the exorcism took place. But it originally started in Maryland. But it got so bad, people got hurt, that the family, after seeing the word Louis cut into Roland Doe's body, they took that as a sign to come here to St. Louis where they had some close family.
And so, this is the real house where at least the first exorcism happened. And you may see that the windows, for example, are very similar to the movie The Exorcist, 1973. Watch.
Roanoke Drive in the Belle Noire section of St. Louis. Now, I reached out to the family and I thought we had something set up, but sadly we can't get inside the house to see where Roland Doe's bedroom was, but it is believed to be on the second floor.
Really, the house transmits disquieting vibrations, at least to me.
Place. A great deal of this information is from the diary of Father William Powdern. In 1948, Roland's aunt Tilly, who was a spiritualist and had taught him how to use a Ouija board, she died, and he became so distraught that he attempted to contact her through the board. Now, this was obviously a terrible mistake because soon after, the paranormal activity began. On January the 15th of 1948, the activity started with scratching sounds coming from underneath the floor in Ronald's grandmother's bedroom, which was above his. The family was experiencing what Father Amorth called the infestation phase. That came from the basement. The family also experienced water dripping from pipes and walls, and a smell of excrement was everywhere, and objects were suspended in the air. On a different day, Ronald told his parents that he saw an image of Jesus in his grandmother's room, and that it moved as if someone was hitting the wall behind it. At first, the family thought it was mice, and they called in pest control, but it clearly wasn't a rodent. Ronald's mother said she heard something scratching his mattress, and then it fell on the floor. His mattress would also move violently at night, just like Reagan's did in the movie. The scratching lasted.
By now, The Exorcist centers around a 12-year-old girl named Regan McNeil, who is possessed by the demon Pazuzu, or, as Regan herself calls it, Captain Howdy.
Who's Captain Howdy?
You know, I make the questions and he does the answers.
This is a slight deviation from the historic tale. The real case involved a 14-year-old boy who's known by the pseudonyms Robbie Mannheim, or more popularly, Roland Doe.
A lot of his former friends, people he knew growing up, always described him as being sort of hyper, sort of troublesome. It wasn't that he was a bad student, he just had a lot of trouble focusing.
The boy's identity remained a mystery for over 70 years, until both the Skeptical Inquirer and The Guardian revealed in 2021 that he was likely one Ronald Edwin Hunkeler.
While the final report of the exorcism remains locked away in the Roman Catholic archives, stories eventually leaked to the press, and reported details about the boy's life after the exorcisms are revealed.
The setting. The primary location was also changed, with author and screenwriter William Peter Blatty bringing the action into what was then the modern year.
Well, in 1949, I was a junior at Georgetown University. And in class, I heard some details about a so-called case of possession and an exorcism that was going on somewhere nearby.
The year is never explicitly mentioned in either the novel or the film, but the former was published in 1971, and the film was released in 1973. Therefore, we can infer that the story takes place in the early 1970s. However, the location is explicitly given in both, and that is the historic neighborhood of Georgetown, Washington, D.C.
Oh, Mom, can't we get a horse?
Well, not while we're in Washington, honey.
I know.
But the Exorcism of Roland Doe occurred in the late 1940s and took place primarily in St. Louis, Missouri. That said, one of Doe's exorcisms occurred at Georgetown.
This was Ronald Hunkeler, as you saw before. He was also a very handsome man. Listen.
NASA engineer named Ronald Hunkeler died from a stroke a month before his 86th birthday. After his passing, he was mainly remembered for his contributions to space exploration, including work on the Apollo space missions and even a patent on a technology that helped panels withstand extreme. Hunkeler was better known under the pseudonym Roland Doe, a 14-year-old boy who was believed to be possessed by the devil and underwent several exorcisms. His case...
At that time, newspapers never revealed his real identity. He was just Roland Doe watched the newspapers of that time.
Small piece in the Washington Post, which was seen by a student attending Georgetown University by the name of William Peter Blatty. For whatever reason, the story stuck with Blatty, and 2 decades later, it inspired him to write a horror novel, which then got turned into a movie that changed cinema forever, The Exorcist.
Be careful, I warn you, really shocking videos.
Doe was subjected to at least 3 different exorcisms. There was the aforementioned one performed in Georgetown, and at least 2 more followed in St. Louis. The first St. Louis exorcism was performed exclusively by Bishop and Bowdern, and it wasn't until the third that assistants Halloran and Van Roo became involved.
According to the Exorcist diary, as Father Bowdern recites the prayers in Latin, the priests shriek with horror.
The number of demons. The Exorcist takes a major deviation from its real-life source, and that's in the number of demons involved.
Is there someone inside you?
Sometimes.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Thanks to various clues, it's strongly hinted that the demon possessing Regan is Pazuzu, a real figure in ancient Mesopotamian religion. However, Pazuzu's involvement is never made explicit in either the novel or the film. Regardless, there is definitely just one demon possessing Regan.
I think it might be helpful if I gave you some background on the different personalities Regan has manifested. So far, I'd say there seem to be 3. She's convinced that she's only one.
And while The Exorcist carried over many details from Doe's possession, there is one thing that was not included. And
of course, there are many differences between the real exorcism of Ronald Hunkeler and, of course, in the movie, the exorcisms of Regan.
As to the demons allegedly inhabiting Doe, who physically assaulted Edward Hughes during his exorcism in Georgetown. Doe reportedly broke free from his restraints and grabbed a piece of the bed spring to use as a weapon. He then used the sharp bed spring to cut Hughes's arm.
People who knew Father Hughes said that he was never the same after this and that he had a problem with his arm.
It was a temporary victory, as Hughes ended the exorcism and Doe was moved to St. Louis. The use of hospitals. Medical institutions are curiously absent throughout much of The Exorcist. In fact, one of the extended sequences in which Regan undergoes various medical tests was excluded from the theatrical release and can only be seen in the director's cut.
Very good. That was.
And this was the real Ronald Hunkeler.
Oh, as previously mentioned, the first exorcism was performed by Edward Hughes at Georgetown University Hospital. After Doe was moved to St. Louis, additional exorcisms were performed by the aforementioned priests at the city's Alexian Brothers Hospital.
The Alexian Brothers Hospital had a secure psychiatric facility where Roland could be taken out of the public eye and everything would be kept secret because the Alexian Brothers were known for their secrecy.
It's unclear why Blatty moved the location, but it's likely owing to the more intimate setting of the bedroom. Witnesses.
Look, I'm only against the possibility of doing your daughter more harm than good.
Nothing you can do could make it any worse.
I can't do it. I need evidence that the church would accept as signs of possession.
When it comes to a supernatural story such as this, it's important to have witnesses. Otherwise, it becomes a mere case of, you'll have to take my word for it, and that's never satisfying. When it comes to The Exorcist, there are very few witnesses. A number of characters know that Regan is having problems, but in regards to the exorcism itself, there are only 3 witnesses: Regan, Karis, and Marin. Unfortunately, 2 of them die, and the third doesn't remember the experience. So, basically, no witnesses.
She doesn't remember any of it.
That's good.
The same cannot be said for Roland Doe. While the veracity of this is certainly under question, it's been reported that 48 people witnessed his numerous exorcisms.
Fortunately, also the end was different, because in the movie, both the exorcists die. Instead, in real life,
all of the exorcists survived and lived long lives. The earliest death was that of Raymond Bishop, who died in 1978. roughly 30 years after the exorcism occurred. He was 72.
And it turned out that
And now let's deepen into the story of Ronald Hunkeler.
Back at the true story of the Exorcist. Who was the real Reagan? Was a German-American family in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. A beautiful colonial-style home in Roanoke Drive in the picturesque Bernard neighborhood of St. Louis, Missouri, was once the home of Roland Doe, or Ronald Hunkeler. And now, the most extraordinary horror story turned urban legend in American history turned this house into a macabre legend. The priest suggested that his family seek help from the Jesuits. Father E. Albert Hughes, a local Catholic priest, asked his superiors for permission to perform an exorcism on the boy in late February 1949. The church granted Hughes' request. To exorcise the boy, Hughes tied him to a mattress and began reading. However, the ritual had to be cancelled after Ronald broke part of the mattress spring and hit the priest on the shoulder, leaving the exorcism into. But stranger things began to happen in the following days. A red sore appeared on Ronald. One of the scars formed the word Louis. This was understood by Ronald's mother as a message that she needed to go to St. Louis, where she had relatives from the Hunkeler family. Perhaps this was a way to save her son.
That's really creepy.
But the exorcist observed the boy's body being scratched and the mattress moving violently. During these strange occurrences, Bodern and Halloran reportedly noticed a pattern in Ronald's behavior. Hospital in St. Louis for more serious treatment. Finally, on April 18th, a miracle happened in Ronald's room at Alexian Brothers. Ronald woke up with a seizure. He cried out to the priest and said that Satan would always be with him. The priest gave the boy a holy relic, a cross, a medal, and a rosary. That night at 10:45 p.m., the priest present asked St. Michael to expel Satan from Ronald's body. Minutes later, Ronald awoke from his trance and said, "He is gone," and described how he had a vision of St. Michael defeating Satan on a vast battlefield.
After he was liberated,
his family returned to the East Coast. According to sources, he found a wife and started a family. He named his first son Michael, after the saint he believed had saved his soul. William Bodern died in 1983 after decades of service to the Catholic Church. Walter Halloran lived until his death from cancer in 2005. He was the last survivor of the team that performed the exorcism of Roland Doe. Brothers Hospital were boarded up and sealed off. The entire facility was demolished in 1978. The family's Maryland home was abandoned in the 1960s and is now a vacant lot. No one would have known about the exorcism of Roland Doe if it weren't for a Washington Post article in August 1949 reporting that priests had actually performed an exorcism. However, this article contained very little detail. Roland Doe or Ronald Hunkeler's names were not mentioned. The case did not make headlines again for more than 20 years.
I want to thank you so much, my followers, from the bottom of my heart. See you soon. Stay tuned.